In this video, we'll explore a common scenario: the need to change the background of an object, such as a piece of furniture, a vehicle, or any other item, and place it within a virtual environment. Building on what we have previously discussed, we can choose to create an entirely artificial setting. For example, as shown here, we can place our object within this virtual environment. This approach can be highly useful for advertising purposes, product promotion, or when we need to develop a virtual scene for a specific project. In this video, we are going to delve into an important technique that complements those covered in many of our previous tutorials: shadow management. We'll learn how to preserve the shadows in the original footage and properly integrate them during compositing. In the video, although visibility is limited, you can see there is a shadow in this part of the compositing, which matches perfectly with the one we see here. Of course, it will be much more contrasted here. In the final compositing, due to the added atmosphere that lowers the contrast, the shadow appears less noticeable, but the principle remains the same. In our previous video on this channel, we provided an in-depth explanation of all the steps involved in designing and building a virtual set. Therefore, we won't be repeating that information here. You can find the link in the description to see how to create a virtual set using markers and lights. In this video, I will only give a brief summary, showing how the markers were distributed within the scene to reconstruct the virtual camera and the positioning of the lights, although the latter is less visible. At the top, we have a light that illuminates the background, even though it isn't visible in this instance. Additionally, there's a side light that helps create a uniform backdrop. I've also placed a light behind the subject, which serves as a backlight. This is crucial because in my virtual video, there's a light source coming from behind, and I want to replicate the same lighting effect on my virtual set. Besides these, there's a front light that illuminates the chair. This light, along with another positioned at the front, is responsible for the shadows on the floor. As usual, I start by importing the video into Blender and performing motion tracking using various markers visible here. The final solve error is 0.28, which indicates a highly accurate solution. I'd like to emphasize that the distance between these two specific markers is exactly 1 meter. Consequently, I can set the scale by identifying these two markers and defining a scale of 1 meter. This step is crucial to ensure that the final set is proportionate to the actual size of my object. For those new to this channel, you can find all the details on how to perform motion tracking and create Chroma key videos in the description and the related playlist. This is the camera that tracks the movement of the real camera. Now, my next step is to recreate the setting exactly as we want it. For this specific case, I've designed a simple version of this room: just a few walls, a window to simulate light coming from behind, and lights positioned to match my real set. One light from behind and one from the front. Before moving on, let's take a moment to discuss the lighting setup. For the external light coming through the window, I utilized an HDR image to create a lighting map, while also ensuring there's a visible background scene outside the window. Specifically, I selected an HDR image depicting a cloudy environment, which is ideal for achieving the desired soft and diffused lighting. The view through the window reveals only a portion of this external setting. In Blender, under the World tab, I've set up the background image and the HDR to create a comprehensive lighting map based on this image. This is what we see when we switch to the rendering preview mode. Here's a useful tip for lighting a closed environment, like a room, using a lighting map. In such situations, it's beneficial to add a light configured in portal mode. This setting optimizes the illumination from an HDR image, efficiently directing external light into the room. This technique enhances rendering performance significantly. While this setup is effective, my goal is to achieve a more widespread and diffused illumination, akin to an old, dusty environment with a slight haze. Under normal conditions, this is how the rendering looks with the lighting we discussed, the front light and the back light. Here, You can see the portion of the HDR image that casts light into the room. To enhance the setting, I added a cube to the room and applied a volumetric material to it, creating a gentle haze. This achieves the desired atmosphere and produces light beams, which are visible here due to the fog's volumetric effect. To achieve this effect, start by adding a 3D element. In this case, a cube that covers the entire scene where you want to apply the effect. Next, in the shading section, set the material to principled volume and connect it to the material output input. At this stage, we need to adjust the density parameters and, if necessary, the anisotropy to achieve the desired outcome. By switching to the camera view and then the rendering view, you'll see that increasing the density factor significantly impacts the final result. I recommend keeping this value very low, as even a small increase makes the outcome much denser. Therefore, we should fine-tune this parameter according to the final effect we want to accomplish. When working with volumetric materials like these, it's crucial to keep in mind that they generate a lot of noise. Typically, achieving high-quality results requires a significant number of samples. To minimize the number of samples needed, it's essential to enable the denoise function. This feature is generally helpful, but especially so for volumes. Without it, we would have to substantially increase the final number of samples, thus extending the rendering time. In the Light Path tab, which manages the number of rays sent by ray tracing to compute illumination, you'll notice that under normal conditions, the number of rays computed within volumes is set to 0. This setting can adversely affect the accuracy of lighting inside these volumes. For instance, with the default value of 0, shadowed areas become even darker because no reflective rays are being calculated within the volume. Now let's see what happens when the value is set to 6. You'll clearly observe an increase in illumination even in the shadowed areas. This improvement occurs because the number of light rays being calculated is significantly higher, greatly enhancing the lighting accuracy within the volumes. Now, as usual, we need to integrate our Chroma key video into the virtual environment. As we've demonstrated in all our previous videos, we'll import the Chroma key video as an image plane. As explained in all the previous videos of this series, the next step is to link the video's movement to the virtual camera. This ensures that when the scene is framed from the camera's perspective, the Chroma key video will seamlessly blend into the scene and move in sync with the camera. The final result will be exactly what we've envisioned. Let's dive into the main point of this video: integrating our Chroma key object with the virtual environment. As we've discussed in many videos on this channel, we need to scale this plane so that it fits perfectly within the 3D world, ensuring it aligns accurately with the floor. As you can observe, our object consistently aligns with the floor thanks to a series of keyframes we created. By adjusting the plane's scale, we ensure its base always seamlessly meets our virtual floor. By selecting the plane and resizing it, I can position it so that the legs intersect perfectly with the floor. As I mentioned earlier, this topic is extensively covered in other videos. I encourage you to watch those explanations to get a thorough understanding of how to properly position the Chroma key backdrop within a virtual set. Now, I would like to talk about shadow management, which is crucial for adding realism to the final rendering. As you can see, our object interacts with the surface through the two front legs of the chair. This means that only these parts will be perfectly aligned with the floor. By enabling shadow projection in the video with Chroma key and switching to rendering mode, we can observe that the front legs, resting on the floor, accurately cast shadows on it. The issue lies with the hind legs. As you can clearly see, they don't touch the ground. As a result, the shadows cast by these legs are unrealistic because they don't align properly with the floor, unlike the front legs. When it comes to dealing with a person, as we've seen in numerous other videos, this issue doesn't arise. In that scenario, a person naturally has just two legs, comparable to the front legs of a chair, so shadow handling is quite straightforward. However, with more complex objects, we encounter a two-dimensional plane, while the object itself has three-dimensional properties. Consequently, we can't ensure that the intersection with the floor covers the entire surface of the object. That's why in such cases we need to employ a different technique to correctly visualize the contact shadows between the object and the floor. I selected the image plane, and under the Object tab, I turned off the shadow property under Ray Visibility. This ensures that the object no longer casts shadows, leaving only the shadows in the original video visible. The only shadows you'll see are those included in the original Chroma key scene, visible at the bottom. When setting up a Chroma key set, it's important to figure out how to preserve the shadows on the floor to some extent. This step is crucial because even if the shadows aren't very noticeable in the final composite, they contribute to a greater sense of realism. While working on keying in After Effects, you will notice that the original shadows of the scene are still visible at the bottom of the image. To achieve this, you need to adjust the parameters to ensure that the shadows are preserved during the keying process. To proceed, we'll follow a two-step process. First, as usual, we'll apply the key light effect to perform the keying of the scene. Next, switching to the status mode of the key light, we'll adjust the levels of clip black and clip white to avoid entirely keying out the lower section. As you can see, increasing the clip black also erodes the underlying part. The goal is to set an appropriate clip black level to achieve accurate keying without removing the shadows in the lower area. Let's move on to the intermediate result mode. As usual, we'll add the advanced spill suppressor to remove the green spill. However, we've encountered an issue that requires an additional step. If we look at the alpha channel after this operation, we'll see that the shadows contain a lot of noise. This is expected because the keying process cannot be precise enough to perfectly isolate just the shadows. To address this, we'll need to apply another filter, the Key Cleaner. This tool smooths and cleans the shadow areas, significantly enhancing the overall quality. Generally, the Key Cleaner is essential for improving the alpha matte of our keying. Comparing the before and after results, you'll notice that the shadow areas are much cleaner, with less noise and better definition. In Blender, I removed the wooden texture from the floor to achieve a clearer visualization of the final result. As you can see, we've preserved the shadows generated from the video using Chroma key. This approach allows us to achieve a significantly higher level of realism without needing to project shadows directly from the transparent video. However, this technique should only be used in specific cases where shadows cannot be projected directly from the transparent video in Blender. For objects with a less pronounced contact point with the floor, such as videos featuring a person, it's highly recommended not to include the original shadows from the video, but to generate them directly within Blender.